Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Piccolillian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost. With me, back again and better than ever, is the judge, Ray Jaffe. So, Ray, glad to have you back. Missed you last week.
Glad to be back from my 1 week hiatus. I heard I missed a lot of good stuff with you and the commish subbing in, but glad to be back in the chair here and looking forward to the next hour.
Well, great. Very exciting weekend of football. Another exciting week coming up, of course. That always seems to be the case. And we generally have been starting our shows talking a little bit about our Kick-Ass Fantasy League. And I will have to admit, it was a little bit more fun when I was 4-0, and the fantasy gods have smote me for bragging.
Smote. Everyone that once in a while, everyone needs a good smoting.
Absolutely. It really puts you in your place. And I am now 4-2 after losing to the professor this week, and just didn't quite have enough. Couldn't get the 58 points I needed from Willis McGahee on Monday night to overcome his lead. So,
no, I'll tell you, with that comeback though with Denver, you might have if the game kept going. That was amazing.
You know what? It's just unbelievable that San Diego let it get to that point, and it's true. I mean, you go into the locker room with a 24-0 lead at halftime. You should barely even have to come out at halftime, and that's probably what happened.
I think you're right. Like a lot of people, I think I watched the first half of the game, especially on the East Coast, and 24-0. It looks like it's just totally under control. Didn't bother watching the second half, and was shocked. And the way I found out was my cousin, who lives in New York, but's a diehard Charger fan for whatever reason. Facebook is just blazing with just flaming posts of anger and hatred towards the Chargers, and I think the Chargers must be coming like the Jets West, because that fan base seems to have suffered a lot in the last several years with false hopes and teams that look like they are but aren't to be, and so anyway, tough loss for the Chargers.
Well, and right after this, we're going to talk a little bit about some changes that are coming to some NFL teams. While we're on San Diego, I can't imagine either Smith or Turner being there after the season the way their year's going. What do you think?
Yeah. I feel like Turner's dodged this bullet a few times already, and at some point, it's almost like the owner has to show that they care. And then they have to make the move. So I agree with you. I think this is probably Turner's last stand.
So that, going down in the annals of history along with Custer's last stand, or maybe not quite so bad?
Not quite so bad, although, never mind.
So you weren't feeling well last week, and I'm sorry to hear. It sounds like you're back and better, and I'm glad to hear that. I will have to admit, I had a little bit of the sickness this weekend as well. I had a bad case of stupiditis.
Stupiditis, John. Tell us more.
Yes. Well, after 5 weeks of doing virtually nothing and being locked in my starting lineup.
I know who it's going to be. I know who it's going to be. I don't know this story. Let me guess. Can I guess?
You know who it is. Yeah, go ahead.
Jordy Nelson.
I got really tricky, and I figured, well, you know what? Kansas City's going to be down by a lot. They're going to get more garbage time points from Dwayne Bowe, even with Brady Quinn throwing him the ball. Jordy Nelson, I can't afford another goose egg. I'm going to put Dwayne Bowe in. Jordy Nelson sitting this week. Against a tough Houston defense. I think we all know what happened.
We do all know what happened. It's funny. I have a quick Jordy Nelson story myself. We have a partner that I don't know if they're partner, but they've been on the show, and we enjoy their website, Fantasy Player Exchange, and this beat the commish game and all that. But there's every week you pick new players. You pick 5 players, see how they do. And my strategy is always to go sort of all in on one player and just fill out the rest of the 5. And not this past week, but 2 weeks ago, I'm like, you know what? This guy is due. He's talented. This team has to break out of it. They were playing against the Colts. I went all in on Jordy Nelson. We know what happened. Green Bay loses to the Colts. Nelson doesn't do much. Obviously, I missed by a week myself, because if I would have done it this week, I would have been, X amount of dollars richer. Exactly, exactly. So Jordy Nelson has burned us both in the last week or 2.
Yeah, so for my weekly what if, or if only column, I'm actually going to, instead of lamenting, that's really the one bad decision I made. I didn't do so well this week, but more just I just didn't quite have the horses. I'm going to focus on the positive, and my players that have disappointed, I'm going to be excited for them to break out for the rest of the season, i.e. Jordy Nelson, Chris Johnson, just to name a few. So that's
well, while we're on the topic of football leagues, with all due respect to our esteemed colleagues all across Kick-Ass Fantasy Football, my auto-drafted team, 4-2.
Well, there may be some management awareness issues on that as well. So maybe it's a little bit about the team management and a little bit about the auto draft. But
it could be. I am managing the team. I am actually I'm not. I'm really not doing a lot of pick up and drop. But I am at least managing the lineup on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. And it's been fun because I can always fall back on that as sort of a hazing mechanism if need be. Well, I had a computer draft my team, Mr. Fantasy Expert, and I took you down.
It need be. So we actually did the same thing. We had another league for friends of mine that were just in the local area, mostly parents of my sons, and 2 of the guys actually didn't make it. So the rest of us pretty much went by the rankings on the site that we used, but we also interjected, like if he already had 2 quarterbacks and the next guy up to quarterback, we would go with somewhere else. And actually the 2 teams that we did that for are actually pretty loaded, and not only just from the auto draft, but because some slight decision making by the rest of us. So I could see that the championship game being between those 2 teams. So we'll see if that plays out by the end of the year. But I think it's kind of funny, all of us experts have our own ideas, and we picked Chris Johnson in the first round, and Antonio Brown, and Jordy Nelson, and they're just not doing so well. But better things are to come. Better things are to come, my friend.
All right. So we're upon week 7.
We're upon week 7, and some interesting news going into the bye week for the Eagles, and they end up firing their defensive coordinator, Juan Castillo. So the grand experiment for the Eagles apparently is over, and so Juan Castillo is out as defensive coordinator. And do you see any effect, any long-term effect, short-term effect? Or how do you feel about that, Ray, especially, being an Eagles fan?
Well, the great experiment, sort of along the lines of, the Titanic or, I'm trying to think of another failed experiment. I should have been prepared with that. But, the Juan Castillo experiment put to rest. I think if you're an Eagles defense owner, probably helps you a little bit because I think Todd Bowles will be a little more aggressive potentially in the play calling. Might actually get to see some production out of that front 4, which has been absolutely invisible this year. I think the other thing to watch is what happens over this next week and a half with the Eagles. The Eagles are on a bye, and what we should mention, we'll hit on the bye weeks, but this week, if of all weeks, watch your bye. 6 teams on a bye this week. I think it's the only week of the season where you have 6 NFL teams on a bye. So. A lot of players down this week, but Reed is, is he sort of is it a little bit of a panic move? Is it a little bit of a desperation move? At his press conference today, for those that follow the team closely and even others, he was asked about Michael Vick, and he sort of gave the same answer he gave about Juan Castillo the day before he fired Juan Castillo. Michael Vick's my quarterback as I sit here right now, so. Keep your eyes on that. I'd be surprised if he makes a change, but there's a lot of things obviously going on in Reed's head.
Well, and so for all of you quarterback needy teams out there, there definitely may be an opportunity for Nick Foles coming in. Don't know if he's going to be the starter, but definitely someone that we want to think about getting in. And I'm going to let you opine on a minute on our next topic. Next topic would be Mike Holmgren sitting down and at the end of the season. So, Ray, if you don't mind, you go talk a little bit about that and maybe go through some of the injuries that happened this week. And I have actually quite the caller list going on, and I'm going to see what's going on with the caller list. So.
All right, yeah. So we got a lot of calls coming in, which is fantastic. So, yeah, so Mike Holmgren to retire, Joe Banner again. John, it's funny, we talk Juan Castillo, Eagles news. The former Eagles president, Joe Banner, taking over the Browns. Don't expect we're going to see much change there. I really don't think from a fantasy perspective we're going to see any real change this year. Probably change a little bit how the Browns are run going forward. But fantasy perspective, sort of just as information, don't expect anything from a fantasy perspective to really change. And as John said, we have a potential bevy of callers, so as we're sort of getting those teed up, I'll start to walk through some of the injuries over the past week and some of the moves you might make off those injuries. So, first thing out of the Cowboys game, and John, I know you still have half an ear here, but the Cowboys, boy, they're having a hard time winning games, but they're not having a hard time scoring points. Last week, they really, their offense really ran up and down the field against the Ravens. But in that game, DeMarco Murray did go down, foot sprain, out. Looks like 1 to 2 weeks, certainly 1 week. So this week coming up, and we'll hear more about this guy later. Felix Jones stepped in, had a very nice game. In DeMarco Murray's absence, 18 for 92 and a touchdown. Jones is obviously the guy that has all the talent in the world. Sort of never has really put it together, but he has a very nice matchup coming up this week to maybe shine. Trent Richardson also for the Browns, banged up, hurt. So turn your attention to Montario Hardesty potentially. Bilal Powell, so the Cardinals running back injury woes continue. They're really sort of going down the list there. We'll talk about some options to pick up to fill that void. And then, one more running back injury I want to get to, John. I don't know if you're back with us yet, but this one is a little unfortunate because this guy looked like we had like a budding two-headed monster. Maybe we still do, but Brandon Bolden, sort of out of commission. So Stephen Ridley, certainly was the lead back. Sort of was sharing some time, but we have to see what's going on with Bolden. But until we're clear there, Ridley will continue to see the bulk of the carries with the Patriots.
It's only good news for Ridley owners, definitely.
Yeah, and Ridley, did not have his best week last week, but I mean he probably, he's really giving New England the best sort of running threat they've had in many years. So what do we have on the call list? Anything to tee up here?
Well, we do. We got a couple calls on here. We got Adam from Baltimore. He's going to ask about Deshaun Jackson, and our good friend Jersey in the House is on as well. But tell you what, let's go ahead and let's get Adam from Baltimore.
All right, hi, Adam, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. Get points for kick return in the league, and considering trying to get Deshaun Jackson since he's having a decent season. And I was wondering if you thought giving Colston would be a decent deal.
Personal opinion, Jackson has not been returning kicks for the Eagles this year. They've had some trouble with their kick return game, although finally Brandon Boykin actually had a decent game this past week. So I think you might have been leaning in the right direction there. I think it looked like they might be forced to put Jackson back there. Boykin probably bought himself another week. So straight up receiver to receiver, I actually like Colston a little bit more, especially in a PPR league. I'm not sure if it's a PPR league, but Colston I think is more likely to get more catches. Where Jackson obviously might hit 3 or 4. You could get the big play though. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I agree, and I like your assessment of Boykin fulfilling his duties a little bit better. I do think it's something to keep in the back of your mind. the problem with Colston is he's a great talent, but throughout the years he's just kind of been, I don't want to say lost in the mix. He's been the number one receiver for Norland, but they've always had lots of other people to throw to and give opportunities to. Now it seems they're focusing a little bit more on Colston, especially with trading away Meacham and maybe with the injury situation down there. So I'm not sure that you would want to get rid of Meacham at this time, unless maybe if Jackson becomes a full-time returner, then it's something you might want to further explore. But I definitely agree with the judge. I think right now it's best to keep Colston.
Well, the good thing is I do have Boykin on my defensive team.
Well, there you go. And that's a smart play because you get some points on the kick return side, and maybe he'll steal a nickelback interception for you here or there.
Yeah, 2 or 3 tackles. Yep.
Good stuff, Adam. All right, well, good luck in your league, man.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for the call, Adam. Appreciate your time. All right, so let's get to our good friend Jersey in the house, and we'll see if the technical difficulties continue. Jersey, are you on?
Hear me?
There you go.
So, guys, you there? Yeah. Hey, guys, 2
Yeah.
quick questions. I'm 5-1 in one league, 4-2 in the other. In the first, in my PPR league, what I have is I need to pick up either Britt, Wright, Demetrius Moore, or Gordon. I'm leaning towards Moore if I can get him, but the problem is, since I have the tie for first with another guy, different divisions, he just scored 2 more points than me. I'm about picking 11 out of 12. So I want to drop Roberts this week because I have Julio Jones and Malcolm Floor on a bye, so I got Cruz as my starter. And when I look at the schedule going forward, Demetrius Moore could be good this week, but also in week 11 going against New Orleans when I lose Cruz. So do you like Britt, Wright, Moore, or Gordon for this week and then going forward? Maybe you'd rank those 4. My first quick question. PPR league, 10-point rushing or point for every reception. You hit 12 receptions, you get another 5 bonus points. You hit 100 yards receiving, you get another 5 bonus points. Point for every 10 yards. So,
John, I'll take the first crack at it if you
go ahead.
Good with that.
Good.
So if I had to rank him, I agree with you, Jersey. Moore would be the first guy I'd get. I'd be surprised if you gave him 11, but maybe you will. I actually would go with Britt next. I think your timing is probably good on Britt. He is a talented guy. He obviously, missed some time and sort of getting back into the mix. But I think the time is right. I think he's, in the next week or 2, you could see a big game from him, and he'll be off the board for you. Then I think I'd go with Wright, and I think I'd go with Gordon. As the 4th guy. I just, Gordon's certainly got some big plays. He seems like he catches a 50-yarder every week, but a little inconsistent still with the reception total.
Yeah, I think Moore's first. I don't think you're going to get him. I mean, I'd be kind of surprised at this point. He's getting a lot of press. I'd actually might go Wright second. I think, especially in the PPR, he's getting a lot more looks, and I think that he may be the way to go. He's more up and coming. And I have Britt 4th, and the only reason he's so inconsistent, and he's always getting injured, and I just don't trust the guy. I really don't. So
don't listen to him, Jersey. You'll regret it. Britt.
Well, he was
Britt
my last.
Sometime in the next 2 weeks, Britt's going to have 120 yards receiving.
Well, Britt was my last pick in the draft. He was my 16th pick, and I dropped him because he was banged up. I picked up Simpson. Figured, all right, Simpson being like, when I picked up Julio Jones in the draft, I figure, or in a trade, I figure, all right, I need to get by week 7. So Simpson, I thought, had a pretty good matchup, but he's kind of petered out. So last week I picked up Roberts, figured, all right, Robertson might be okay, he scores touchdown. Now they got a quarterback problem. Now the Skelton's in. So I'm trying to get by this week, and then I'm trying to look forward to maybe week 11. So
I think just so I can pile on John, I might change my sleeper to Britt. I think he's going to actually have a big week this week against Buffalo.
Well, there you go. So it's
that's what I was. Hey, and my last question is, I've been starting Vernon Davis all year long. He's been doing good. He's had a couple games, so like last week. And I also have Witten, because Witten was part of the trade I got also. Now, Witten's looked good the last 2 weeks. With his back being an injury his first 3 weeks, he didn't look good. Week 4 he was good. He had to bye week 5. Week 6, he had maybe 80 yards, six receptions, would have given me 14 points. I think I got 6 points from Vernon Davis. Who do you like this week? Because I don't know what Alex Smith is going to do, but sometimes you don't know what Romo is going to do. So which one do you like to see me start in that PPR league?
Well, I'll go first in this one, and I like Witten. I think he's coming on strong. I think, and with the injury to Murray, they may actually rely on the short passing game a little bit more. With Davis, I think they play Seattle. Is that correct? San Francisco.
Yes, sir.
They do.
Yes. So, yeah.
Good secondary.
That's just a tough matchup for Davis. And, Witten, like you said, it's come along strong the last couple of weeks. So
I actually agree with John in this one. I think this week, I still like Davis more overall. I think this week against Carolina, I like the Witten matchup more. Seattle's secondary is actually pretty good, as Tom Brady found out, last week. So I might steer towards Witten this week.
All right. I appreciate it, gentlemen. Thank you. Hopefully I keep going, staying in first in both leagues. I appreciate the info and help. Best luck to you guys this coming week, and thanks again as usual, and we'll chat later. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, Jersey. See you.
Hey, thanks, Jersey. All right, so this is the Lillian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. We are running up against our break time. We do have our call-in line at 877-511-1024, so we've already had a couple callers. Please feel free. We're going to take 2 minutes, and then we'll be back with Jumpin' John and the Judge. Thank you for listening.
Now is your chance to experience the new game that's transforming fantasy sports. Fantasy Player Exchange is a new daily game that allows you to compete against friends and fantasy foes for cash prizes. With FPX, you can select 5 players from any active sport. Sign up now at fantasyplayerexchange.com for your chance to beat ESPN Radio's Henry the Commish Brick and win $1,000 cash. Go to fantasyplayerexchange.com to sign up and play today. Remember, that's fantasyplayerexchange.com.
I'm sexy and I know.
Car Toys, the most innovative car customizing shop in its class. Summer is here, and so's the heat. Better get that remote start so you can cool off in your car in style with your smartphone. Car Toys can install remote start on Mercedes-Benz, push-button start, and stick shift. Reduce that glare with the best 3M window film. And while you're at it, get your car detailed by Car Toys Detail Department so your ride looks, feels, and smells brand new. Car Toys defines what everything for your car really means, from TV to reality. That's why Car Toys is the leader in the industry in car customization. Car Toys' knowledgeable team are the best in their class. Like Car Toys on Facebook and check them out at distinctivecartoys.com.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for 2 to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Piccolillian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. This is your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and with me is Judge Ray Jaffe. Ray, I believe we have a special guest on the line, and we're going to use this next segment to do a little bit of waiver wire magic. And so we have Rob Warner from ffspin.com. Is that correct, Rob?
That is correct. Yeah, thanks for having me on. ffspin.com is where we post most of our articles. I'm also affiliated with fantasyfootballcrystalball.com. And this week we're actually trotting out. We're going to give Fantasy Football Crystal Ball for free this week for Week 7. So it's affiliated with RT Sports and My Fantasy League and CBS. We're integrated with all 3 of them. So if you go on there, you can sign up for the free week. Basically, if you just go on to fantasyfootballcrystalball.com, you can get all the information there. And basically the way it works is we aggregate rankings from the top 20 sites, and we basically have your roster, your league setting, all your league scoring. You don't have to put any of that in. We have all that, provided that you're on CBS, RT, or My Fantasy League. And then based on that data and incorporating the aggregate rankings, we can pretty much give you what we think is the most accurate start-sit rankings available on the web.
So you have you have volumes of information that you can share with the people and help them get their roster set and their lineup scored away for Sunday. That's good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes too much information can be harmful, but I mean, the more the merrier is the way we look at it. We try to put as much in as possible, and at least half the time I think we give the right prognostications. But I mean, this week we like 2 weeks ago I had Reggie Wayne as one of my downgrades of the week when he had a career week. So like we always say, it's 50% luck. We're not always right, but we do our best.
Well, all you need is that little bit of an edge sometime, and believe me, some people that are associated with this show, like the professor, are total stat heads, so you can't give them too much information.
There's not such a thing as too much information. Well, I'll tell you, Rob, I understand where you're coming from, and every week I actually write an article, and I titled the article titled "If Only," and I kind of lament on the choices I made and why they weren't kind of the right choices. But actually, I look at maybe the decision behind it, not just bitch and moan session, but why I made that choice and why it might have been the right choice or why maybe it should have been the other. So we all go down that road. But I think more information the merrier, and it's up to the individual owners to make their final decision.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, that's something we might want to incorporate because we do something similar. We do upgrades, downgrades, and we hit on some of them, but we're dead wrong on some other ones. So yeah, maybe a Monday morning quarterback explaining our rationale would maybe get us off the ledge a little bit with some of the people that read our stuff. Good idea.
Yeah, well,
So Rob, you have some. You have some tips and hints for the listeners this week around?
Yeah, sure. Like you guys mentioned, I mean, this is the first week where there's 6 byes, so there's a lot of main guys that are going to be going fishing this week, especially at the quarterback position. Atlanta, Denver, San Diego, Philly. So there's the 4 top quarterbacks. Some of the guys I'm looking at this week, we saw Josh Freeman have a monster game against Kansas City, and I think he can do it again this week. He faces New Orleans, which we all know how bad that defense has been. They're the 26th ranked pass defense. So, I mean, I think Freeman could do it again this week. I think he's an adequate option if he's on your waiver wire. I mean, in some deeper leagues he's probably snatched up, but he's not really running the ball that much. But I think last year in 2 games against the Saints, he averaged 290 yards per game. He had 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. So I think he's one guy to definitely take a look at if he's floating on your waiver wire. And like you guys had mentioned earlier, the Buffalo-Tennessee game has the potential for some shootouts just based on how bad both defenses are. So saying that, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's been kind of hit or miss. He's been a turnover machine this year. But the matchup with Tennessee doesn't get much better than that. They've been a sieve. I think they're 29th, actually, in pass defense. So I expect him and Stevie Johnson and maybe even Chandler, the tight end, to produce decent stats for you if you're looking for a bye week filler.
Hey, Ryan Fitzpatrick would also like all your data as well, being from Harvard. I'm sure he could synthesize it quite nicely.
Yeah, he's got a pretty big brain and pretty big arm. So I mean, both of those could pay dividends this week in a pretty favorable matchup. And I'm sorry,
you're stereotyping these Ivy League types. I mean, maybe not all Ivy Leaguers are these geek stat heads. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, I guess they're more than just lawyers, but I mean. On the other side, too, I think Hasselbeck opposing Fitzpatrick could also be a good play. You were talking about Kenny Britt and Kendall Wright. I think they're both solid plays. He's got great weapons, and Buffalo, again, has been a really poor defense against the pass. They've given up 13 passing touchdowns already this year. So Fitzpatrick and Hasselbeck facing each other could definitely help you if you have any of those big-name quarterbacks that are on buys this week.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
I'm gonna interrupt you here for a minute. I have a special mystery caller on the line. He says he's actually a friend of yours, and he has a question about a handcuff. So I wonder if we can get him online. He's got a question specifically for you.
Sure.
All right. Adam.
Hey, it's Adam from Baltimore. How you doing?
Yeah, what's going on, Adam?
Hey, how you doing? Oh, good to finally get through to you. I had to dig deep for a question just so I could call again and talk to you. But I have a deep roster lead, and I was wondering if I should hold on to a handcuff for Albert Morris in the form of Royster, or if I should, maybe pick up a free agent, Devery Henderson, Vincent Brown, he'll be back in a couple weeks, I guess, or however you say, Joaquin Bell in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, It looks like, I mean, you can never trust Mike Shanahan, but it looks for right now like he's going to ride Albert Morris into the ground. Royster really hasn't done much. Albert Morris actually had a halfway decent game this week against Minnesota. RG3 did most of the rushing, and the Vikings had the number one run defense, so I didn't expect much out of Morris. But
oh, yeah, you probably didn't like that, did you?
As a Vikings fan, I was, it's a miracle my remote didn't end up in the middle of my television. But, I mean, if you're looking for a receiver, I think Devery Henderson is a strong pickup. It looks like Lance Moore's hamstring injury might keep him out another week. Tampa Bay's defense is really poor against the pass. They're second worst to Washington. They're giving up 312 yards through the air. We saw what Henderson did in his start the week before the bye at 120 yards, caught a deep touchdown. So I think Henderson's got much more upside than Royster. So I think that's definitely a smart move.
All right. One more thing. How about as a running back, Ronnie Hillman in Denver? I mean, what do you see for him? Any upside there?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the injury history with McGahee. He obviously struggled the first half of last night's game. I think he had 7 carries for 5 yards. He kind of broke out in the second half, ended up with close to 100 yards combined. But, I mean, it's a tough call. I mean, if you're in a dynasty league, I think Hillman's a possibility. But if you're just playing for this year, I'm not sure if I see much. I mean, Hillman's only got 17 carries, 50 yards on the season. That's in 4 games. They do have Lance Ball there and no Sean Marino still kicking around. So I don't see a whole lot of upside for Hillman this year. You're kind of banking on a McGahee injury. So there's probably, I would expect there's some better options for you that will probably have a little bit better chance at some playing time in the near future.
All right, well, I hope Albert the Butler Morris stays healthy then. Thanks, Rob.
All right, no problem.
Appreciate it, Adam. All right. Always good to hear from our loyal callers. So why don't you keep going and
a couple more for us, Rob.
Yeah, let me hit on a couple running backs. Like this week, Charles, Matthews, and McCoy are all out, and you guys were talking about the injury to Murray, and there's also the injury to Richardson that's kicking around with his rib injury. It's kind of up in the air whether he's going to play. Playing off of that, Montario Hardesty, he missed a ton of action last year in his first season. He did actually have 15 carries, 56 yards, and a touchdown in the Browns game this week once Richardson went out. And then this week he had a much better matchup, as Sean Green owners can attest to. He plays the Colts. So, I mean, if you're looking for a deep flex play or something like that, it remains to be seen what happens with Richardson. The Browns do like to run the ball. They have a pretty solid offensive line. Facing a Colts defense that's given up 159 yards a game, I think even in spot duty, or if they decide to rest Richardson or split carries, I think Hardesty's a guy to definitely take a look at. Another guy that might be on your waiver wire is LeGarrette Blount. I'm not a huge fan. He never averages, it seems like, more than 2 yards a carry, but he has been getting the goal line carries, much to the chagrin of Martin owners. Blount's got touchdowns in the last 2 games, so matchup like we talked about against the Saints, they can't stop the run or the pass, so Blount could easily get a cheap touchdown for you this week and be a filler for bye week, or if you have any injury concerns.
Good deal. And you have maybe one wide receiver for us to round it out?
Yeah, the wide receivers, I actually like both receivers in the Rams this week, Brandon Gibbons and Chris Gibbons, the rookie there. Packers defense suffered a bunch of injuries Sunday night. They've been pretty mediocre against the pass, 18th, 230 yards a game. Gibbons has been getting some deep. He hasn't had a whole ton of targets, but he had 3 straight games of, I believe it's a 50-plus yard reception. So if you're looking for one explosive play, I think Gibbons is your option. If you're looking for a little bit more consistency, I think Brandon Gibson's a guy to definitely keep an eye on if you're looking for a bye week filler.
Well, Rob, great minds think alike. Spoiler alert for my sleeper this week will be one of those 2 guys.
All right.
Well, I think it's funny, Rob. I think before we knew you were coming on, that you pretty much mirrored our ads list for the names that we talk about. So I think it's great stuff. And so just want to tell you a funny story about Hardesty. Is I'm in a pretty competitive 16-team league, and I've been carrying Hardesty for the first 5 games. I ended up dropping him last week due to an Alshon Jeffrey injury, and I needed to pick up another. We start 4 wide receivers. And so now I'm regretting that move as well. So I think there's another one to add for my if only. But
yeah, I did something similar with Felix Jones, so I'm feeling your pain.
So no, that's great stuff, Ryan. I appreciate you coming on, and I think that pulled some great stats out there. It's always helpful to back up your analysis, and I think it was a good segment.
Good stuff.
Yeah,
Fantasy Crystal Ball, ffspin.com. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks for having me on, guys.
So long.
Okay, great.
Oh, John, we lose you? Well, our host, John, might be having some...
Sexy and I know. Car Toys, the most innovative car customizing shop in its class. Summer is here, and so's the heat. Better get that remote start so you can cool off in your car in style with your smartphone. Car Toys can install remote start on Mercedes-Benz, push-button start, and stick shift. Reduce that glare with the best 3M window film. And while you're at it, get your car detailed by Car Toys Detail Department so your ride looks, feels, and smells brand new. Car Toys defines what everything for your car really means, from TV to reality. That's why Car Toys is the leader in the industry in car customization. Car Toys' knowledgeable team are the best in their class. Like Car Toys on Facebook and check them out.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Now is your chance to experience the
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Thick Lily Inn Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost. Judge Ray Jaffe is with me, as always. I apologize for the technical difficulties, and that's what you get with the Internet sometimes. We have another guest from Fantasy Player Exchange. Victor's back with us again this week. So, Victor, sorry for the delay, but I'm glad you're with us.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on again.
Always a pleasure, Victor.
Yeah, Victor, timing was off a little bit. You missed another great story from Ray about his walk down Fantasy Player Exchange. We were talking about Jordy Nelson. So why don't you tell us again real quick, Ray, and Victor, you can tell us how he can overcome that.
No problem.
Yeah, so it was funny because John earlier was mentioning that Jordy Nelson, and this is the last week he had started him every week. He sort of came into the year as a must start, and he sat him. I said, it's funny you say that because Fantasy Player Exchange, which is a site, FPX.me, the Beat the Commish games, good stuff. I'm hooked. I do it every week now. My strategy, generally, not to give everything away, is I'll usually pick one player that I feel really strong about and sort of go all in on that player and round it out with a few other shares of players. So 2 weeks ago, I'm like, if the Green Bay offense has to start clicking, Nelson hasn't done anything, I got to go all in on Nelson. Go all in on Nelson. It's the Colts game. What happens? They get to the lead. They end up losing. Nelson doesn't do much of anything. I missed it. Well, obviously this past week we know what happened. Jordy Nelson probably has one of the biggest weeks of the year for wide receiver. And had I reversed that, I would have been another $50 richer on Beat the Commish game. And this past week, same sort of strategy. I think I might have landed third or something like that. I think I went all in on Larry Fitzgerald this week. Good, but not Jordy Nelson kind of numbers.
Yeah, well, actually, you were third, I believe, and you were right behind the commish, which, we don't have to tell him that, but I think he figured it out himself.
Yeah, it was paining me to see that the commish actually had a good showing for a change.
Yeah, number 2. I mean, much better than his past showings, and he promised he was going to be number 1, but, he's getting closer. Every week he promises he gets closer.
Yeah.
He makes a lot of promises, let's put it that way, but we won't get into that.
Right, and then we're just going to start to hear his excuses. You know what the excuses are, everyone has one and they all stink. So.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure that I mention that we are still doing the promo where you get $10 free just for signing up at fantasyplayerexchange.com. So you can play those $10 in any of the games. We suggest everybody play the $2 game for the Beat the Commish every week. As you all know, if you don't, the Beat the Commish game is a weekly game where you can win $50 every single week for just having a higher percentage for return on investment over the commish. I mean, whoever has the highest every week gets $50 cash, and it's a great deal.
And just so the listeners know, I do not believe the commish has won yet, right?
No, I don't believe
so every week somebody has put $50 in their pocket.
Correct. He's been close. Today, this was his closest week, but he hasn't been there yet.
The commish is number 1 in our hearts, so does that count?
Well, not in this game, and the hearts are nice, but not. Someone's still winning, and it's not him. That's all I know.
So you guys, I know we've talked the last couple of weeks. You have some exciting things going on. You have the college football that you've added. Now I guess you have the NBA on the horizon, so that's going to be coming around soon. So I think you need to remind people it's all sports.
Yeah, that's our main focus. We're a multi-sport game, but it's still a daily game. But you can play any of the major sports that are available and active at that time. So right now, it's kind of in between where we have, some college football games during the week. You still have your Monday, Thursday, Sunday games for the NFL. But starting in about 3 weeks when the NBA starts, you're going to have games every single night. And then we're going to be starting college basketball also. And then we did start about 3 weeks ago the NCAA football. So we're really getting all sports at all times. So we're hoping, once basketball starts up, you're going to see options galore of, who you can have on your team.
That's exciting. You are going to have college basketball?
That's our goal, yeah. Our goal is starting right after the NBA starts. We haven't figured out what level yet because, there's so many divisions and everything. We're probably going to do your top-level teams right now, like Duke, into North Carolina, stuff like that. But we are looking to do college because we're really heading towards our big goal is towards the end of the season, obviously college bowl games for football, and then March Madness week, imagine, is going to be ridiculous.
I was just thinking, can you imagine with all the pools going on, and then you have this game where you can actually pick players, and I mean, you just, for a sports lover, you're going to be at your wit's end. You're not going to do it. It's going to be so much action.
It's going to be nonstop for months, exactly.
But I believe other than the Super Bowl, that's probably the biggest weekend of sports betting that goes on the books in Vegas. So I would imagine that might be one of the bigger weekends for you as well. So it's definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, we're like I said, we're very excited. We don't want to rush the football season, of course. We really are really dedicated to football season. The games during a week right now. We have the college football bowls. You guys know. I'm sure you guys watch college football also, and the bowl games are just, from the end of Thanksgiving through Christmas, you got pretty much a game every single night, if not 3.
Yeah, and I think people will be. It's just you get hooked on it. You'd be wrapped into it all year. I think you actually have. You have a $0 game on there too, don't you? Where people can maybe join in and play for free.
Yeah, we have a free game every week. It costs you nothing every day. Excuse me. And you still can win $20 on it. So anybody who gets first place in that wins $20 every single day.
Yeah. So if it doesn't, you go on and just get a taste for it, and roll the dice, see how the game works, and then start to get involved in some of the leagues. Good stuff, Victor.
Yeah.
Hey, Victor.
Yeah.
I got a little advice for you for maybe next year, but maybe even sooner. Instead of beat the commish, maybe we should beat the judge. What do you think?
Well, at least I'll have a chance of winning. He might win one or something.
You guys might save some money if you do it that way.
Yeah, Well, thanks a lot, guys. And like I said, if everybody goes check us out at fantasyplayerexchange.com, sign up. You can play for free right now.
Good stuff, Victor.
Well,
Always
Victor.
enjoy it every week. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks for having me. Bye.
All right, we'll talk to you later. Okay, so again, we're running up against our next commercial break. It's been a jam-packed hour, and we had a couple callers, a couple sponsors, and some good stuff. So let's take our last commercial break, and we'll be back. And let's shorten this up a little bit, about a minute and a half, with the judge, Ray Jaffe, and I'm Jumpin' John, and this is the Pickle-Ian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show.
Fantasy football.
Well, this has flown by. We've had 3 call-ins, 2 guests.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for 2 to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
I'm sexy and I know.
Car Toys, the most innovative car customizing shop in its class. Summer is here, and so's the heat. Better get that remote start so you can cool off in your car in style with your smartphone. Car Toys can install remote start in Mercedes-Benz, push-button start, and stick shift. Reduce that glare with the best 3M window film. And while you're at it, get your car detailed by Car Toys Detail Department so your ride looks, feels, and smells brand new. Car Toys defines what everything for your car really means, from TV to reality. That's why Car Toys is the leader in the industry in car customization. Car Toys' knowledgeable team are the best in their class. Like Car Toys on Facebook and check them out at distinctivecartoys.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Pickle-Ian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio. This is your host, Jumpin' John Prevo, Judge Ray Jaffe by my side. And just to remind everyone, we do have a caller line, 877-511-1024, and we do ask everyone to visit our website, www.kickassfantasyfootball.com. And last segment, Judge, so let's get right into it. Usually do this towards the beginning of the show, but I have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind answering.
Please, fire away.
Please fire away. A couple quarterbacks. I really want to know. Do you think they are for real? So we have Josh Freeman, 15 for 26, 328 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. We have Sam Bradford against Miami. Was 26 for 39, 315 yards, had 34 yards rushing and a touchdown. The only rushing touchdown, might I add. I believe actually the only touchdown for the offense. And then Russell Wilson versus New England. 16 for 27, 293 yards, 3 touchdowns. 3 young quarterbacks, or any of them for real?
Well, they're all for real to the extent that they're sort of locked into their jobs. I think Russell Wilson cemented his place with this last week over in New England. I like, of the 3 going forward, I think I like Sam Bradford the most. Freeman, a lot of people were high on coming into last year, disappointed. Maybe he's turning around a little bit. I do like, and we had Rob from the Crystal Ball on, and I agree. I think Freeman, could have a nice week coming up here against New Orleans, just because they're going to have to score points to stay in the game. I sort of think the same is true of Sam Bradford against Green Bay. They're going to have to score points to stay in the game. So I actually like Freeman and Bradford this coming week. Wilson against San Francisco. It's going to be a long night. San Francisco's going to be angry after that loss to the Giants. He is still a rookie. His teammates all swore up and down after that Patriots game. They're like, okay, he's our guy now, but not this week.
Yeah, you know what it says to me, actually, is obviously they're all starting quarterbacks in the NFL. They all have some talent, and I think all three of them are definitely a matchup-based start, depending on, what your league is, if it's a two-quarterback league or if you have some bye-week troubles. And I think all three of them, look at the matchup before you're definitely getting them in the lineup. Bradford's obviously the most proven since he's been around a little bit longer. But yeah, that's what it says to me. I think they're
I agree.
a little bit more
matchup-based. I agree. They're all good enough to be considered based on the right matchup.
Yeah. So that's a lot of fantasy football is in matchups and getting that right person in. Couple running backs I want to throw at you, and I want to know what you think. Are they for real? Sean Green, 32 rushes, 161 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
Trade him.
Ahmad Bradshaw. Well, that's great analysis. We're actually going to get to that in just a few minutes. And then Ahmad Bradshaw, he was 27 for 116 yards and a touchdown against San Francisco. So, I think we have one answer already from you, but are either of them for real?
Yeah, I do think. Bradshaw's sort of always been for real. He's had some injury problems. Put the ball on the ground and passed a little bit, but maybe the threat of David Wilson out there has got him going again. But he's after a couple rough starts, his last 2 weeks of. Obviously he went absolutely crazy 2 weeks ago, 200 yards. Basically, 116 yards against San Francisco is like 200 yards against anyone else. So Bradshaw, I think, is for real in that offense. Sean Green, I would, try and find a willing trade partner and try and spin him off after what I am sure will be by far his best week of the year.
Well, it's funny because Bradshaw did have 200 yards the previous week, and I made a comment during our kick-ass draft about wondering at which week, Bradshaw is no longer the starter, assuming an injury at least. I'll have to tell you, he was definitely my surprise of the week. And he was turned some heads, and at least my head. And I think I think he's a solid starter, and I think you roll with him. So it changed my opinion of him, and I like Bradshaw. Green,
I think it was impressive.
Yeah. So we'll talk about Green in a few minutes. 2 wide receivers, got to round out the positions there. Let me tell you, Jordy Nelson. 9 catches, 121 yards, 3 touchdowns. I think we've talked about him a little bit on the show already, so you know how I'm kind of feeling right now. Mike Williams had 113 yards and a touchdown. Are either of them for real?
Well, Nelson obviously is for real. I think the question with Nelson is just, did he lose his spot as a sort of a no-brainer starter every week? I would say Green Bay. That was against the Texans too. It was a head scratcher what was going on with Green Bay this year with all that firepower. I think a lot of people are of the opinion that they've sort of solved whatever riddles were befuddling their offense. So, Nelson is not a question. I think it's just a matter of whether you start him every week. Obviously, everyone's going to start him this coming week, and I think he'll go back to where he was last week, putting up some regularly solid numbers. Mike Williams has actually he's had 2 very good weeks back to back, 115 yards, 113 yards. As a rookie, he was a real up-and-comer, 11 touchdowns, almost 1,000 yards, fell off a little bit last year. So is Mike Williams for real? I actually have him, and I played him last week, and I've played him a couple times this year. So I think he's real enough as a wide receiver 3 or a flex player, especially when you have all these bye weeks coming up.
Yeah, I agree with you, and much to my chagrin for not starting Jordy Nelson, probably cost me a playoff spot. And obviously,
but you're not bitter about this.
No, not at all. But you know me, Ray. I don't hold a grudge.
Right.
And yeah, so and I think he's one of the players you got to keep him in your lineup because when you sit him and he goes off, you're killing yourself. And here I am, right? So there's proof enough, and for our tens and tens and maybe even dozens of listeners out there. And then Mike Williams, I think we mentioned it before with Josh Freeman. I think he's a matchup play. get the right matchup, you put them in and feel fine about it. And if it's a tougher matchup, maybe you sit them. But I think, in the division they're in, they have some easier matchups. So you go ahead and have them on your roster, start them a couple times like you mentioned, and feel good about it.
Yeah, and they have New Orleans this week with all the byes. I think Mike Williams is actually probably closer to should start than a question mark this week.
Ooh, there you go. A little bold judgment from the judge. And I want to remind everyone, he talked about byes. We have Atlanta, Denver, Kansas City, Miami, Philadelphia, and San Diego all in the bye this week. So adjust your lineups accordingly. I'll tell you what, Ray, we got about 5 minutes left, and it's time for our favorite segment of the week, and that is the studs, and sleepers. I did miss you last week. I did throw out a couple studs, and sleepers, so we'll go over them really quickly. I had Roddy White as my stud. I figured it was his turn. They had an Oakland secondary, which has been porous. He did catch 6 balls for 72 yards and a touchdown, which are pretty good numbers. Not necessarily studly, but the way that was kind of an odd game, Atlanta, struggled to win it with the field goal in the end. So I'll take those numbers from Roddy White. My stud of the week was Stephen Ridley versus Seattle. He had 16 rushes for 32 yards. Seattle, we mentioned their secondary, but the defense as a whole is pretty good. So Stephen Ridley was a good dud.
That was a good dud call. Yeah,
that was a good call. My sleeper, not so good. I had Larod Stevens Howling. I figured, look, if there's any game you're going to put an Arizona running back in there, it's against Buffalo. Well, Stevens Howling had 11 rushes for 22 yards. Not such a great sleeper, so a little bit disappointing. I actually started him in 2 leagues. I'm big with putting my money where my mouth is this year. I did it in my drafts based on what I was saying on the shows. I did it this week with Larod Stevens Howling, and guess what? Did not work out.
Yeah, too many names. One, he needs to lose a name. Then he might be a better player.
It's really got to flow, right? It's really got to flow. And so let's tell you what.
All the letters on his jersey, I think, are slowing him down. Actually, he needs to lighten that up a little bit.
Yeah, it's not like a jockey where they kind of even out the weight, right? So let's go over a little bit. Studs, and sleepers. I know you have your picks, so let's hear them.
So studs this week, I am going to go with Felix Jones. Murray. I think everyone is assuming that Murray's out this week, so Felix Jones will be the lead back. Dallas ran the ball incredibly well against the Ravens. Ravens obviously had some key injuries in that game, but ran the ball very well. I think they carry that over against Carolina. Not a particularly strong defense. I like Felix Jones to have actually a very big game coming up this Sunday.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I'm wondering if they might do a little bit more with the passing game, a little more confidence with Romo. Maybe put some stickum on Des Bryant or something. But definitely Carolina's not very good against the run. I'm going, again, putting my money where my mouth is, and I think I'm going a little bit more on hope and a prayer than anything else. But I'm going Chris Johnson.
Oh, my Lord.
Stud. Not sleeper, because start of the week. Chris Johnson, I think he has a lot to prove. I still think he's not quite where he needs to be. But I think, this is really the put up or shut up week. And Tennessee's got to be feeling good about what they did against Pittsburgh. Chris Johnson's had a couple good weeks. Buffalo defense is last in the league. They're letting up 173.5 yards a game rushing. So, unless he gets another goal line carry for a touchdown stolen from him, I expect a big game from Chris Johnson.
All right. My dud for this week is Joe Flacco playing against the Houston Texans, who, interesting because Aaron Rodgers looked like Aaron Rodgers and picked him apart to the tune of 6 touchdowns. Probably a wake-up call for the Texans, who were sort of rolling merrily along before that game. I think they fixed things. I also think Baltimore, like I said, they lost Lewis, they lost the cornerback. I can't think of the name. I think Houston's going to take it to Baltimore at home. I just think it's going to be. I think it's actually going to be a rough Sunday for Baltimore. They don't have money. I think it's going to be a rough one. Joe Flacco, dud.
Oh, that's a pretty interesting pick, and I think you're right against a mad defense there. I just want to call Earth to New York Jets fans, stud of the week is going to be Sean Green. I know what he did last week. Great for him. I can't see it happening, not only just 2 weeks in a row, but against a New England defense that's only letting up 82.7 yards per game. So, just want to remind everyone that he is Sean Green.
That's a great call, actually. I love that. This is probably the first time ever in Stud, Duds, and Sleepers I'm angry that I wish I had picked Sean Green.
Well, we did have a rule about picking New York Jets, and I broke it just because I want to remind everyone that, aberrations happen, and I think last week was an aberration.
Yeah.
I'm not wishing poor on everyone, but there you go. All right, so who do you have for your sleeper this week, Ray?
Well, I was really tempted to go with Kenny Britt after our conversation earlier, but I'm going to stick with my original thought, Brandon Gibson of the Rams, playing at home against Green Bay. So, like I said, St. Louis will have to go to the air to stay in the game. Gibson's actually been very solid this year. Certainly gets catches, had 7 for 91 last week. It's been good for 3 or 4 catches, every week, even when Amendola was around. So I like Brandon Gibson. I think he could see 7-8 catches again and go over 100 yards.
That's not a bad call, and I definitely on our ads and with Rob, we were talking about earlier from the Fantasy Crystal Ball, the difference between Chris Gibbons and Brandon Gibson. And I like Brandon Gibson, especially if you're in a PPR league, you got to get the points for the catches. And so it's a little bit more consistency than someone like Chris Gibbons. But, someone has to catch the ball in St. Louis, so that's a pretty good call for a sleeper. I'm going for Jermaine Gresham. I want to see if he can do it 2 weeks in a row. He had a great game last week, I think it was a 55-yard touchdown catch. In the preseason, we had touted him as the true second option in the Cincinnati passing game, and I think he's starting to round out into that second option. And I hate to admit it, but the Pittsburgh defense is getting a little bit older, a little bit slower, and I think that Jermaine Gresham is going to do a little bit of damage against Pittsburgh.
Good stuff. Well, we will have a lively discussion about it next week.
I'm thinking we will. And that is about all we have for our show tonight. This has been the Piccadilly Inn Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show with your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and my co-host in crime. I usually say cohort, but we'll say co-host this week, Judge Ray Jaffe. So, Judge, glad to have you back this week, and we will see you next week.
Great to be here. Good luck this weekend.
All right. Thank you, and we'll see you all, our loyal listeners, next week as well.